everyone. Today I'll be speaking to you about how the handicapped interface with the technological world. Now, when I decided on this topic, I purposely chose something that's quite broad because, it was early in the year. I wanted to see, how does BBD operate? What are they providing to people? What are they doing? So I made sure to take something broad, but as you can imagine, if I were to go through every technological interface, we will be here for a very, very long time. So to help us, I made sure to limit the scope to a different topic. Well, same topic in the same spectrum, but much more focused. Now we'll be looking into the importance of accessibility of web applications for people with disabilities. Now, I believe this is a lot more valuable to us as we are mostly web developers here. We do web applications for people. And let's be honest here, not all our web applications are very accessible. So now I'm going to ask you all to please do a little thing for me. Could you please close your eyes? Don't worry, I'm not asking you to stand up to do anything like jumping jacks. Just stand up, just close your eyes for me. No, close your eyes. Close your eyes and listen to me. This is your world now. You are now a visually impaired person. You want to use a website. This is your life. JavaScript. Heading level 1. JavaScript, often abbreviated as JS, is a high-level interpreted programming language that conforms to the ECMAScript specification. JavaScript has curly braces. Has curly bracket syntax, dynamic typing, prototype-based object orientation, and first-class functions. In this course, you will learn the basics of JavaScript, including syntax, language fundamentals, and testing. List 14 items. Introduction to JavaScript, link. Types, link. Flow of control and errors, link. Loops, link. JavaScript functions, link. Expressions and operators, link. Numbers and dates, links. Text formatting, links. Arrays, links. As you can imagine now, listening to this, you're very confused. This is the life of a visually impaired person when they have to use a screen reader to access your website. Now, I like to think I gave you a good example of a screen reader, as majority of them are horrendous at reading websites, because a lot of us like to design a lot of frilly websites, visually beautiful websites, but because of that, it leads to a lot of inaccessibility. So you're probably asking yourself, why do we want to make our web applications accessible? Well, we develop web applications for people, correct? And disabled people are people, all right? We want to bring forth our creations to as many people as we can. Now, obviously, a lot of us, it depends on the scope of our web application. We do have a target audience, but for example, working for SARS, your intended audience is the entire of the South African population. And there are a lot of disabled people, visually impaired or like audio impaired. It's difficult for them. So it's important for us to take into account accessibility when we design and implement our web applications. So when we speak about accessibility, we speak about poor, perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. Now, these 4 principles are important when we're designing our web application. So for perceivable, a user must be able to look at the website, perceive what they need to do, which control elements they need to fill in, and which buttons they need to click to move through the website. It's important that they are able to perceive what they need to do and follow through. Operable. This is important for anyone to actually use your website accordingly. So what this typically means is, besides using a mouse interface to traverse through your website, you will need to ensure that your website can use a keyboard only to interact with the website. So that's ensuring that control elements can be accessed through tab and enter, because a lot of screen reader users only use the keyboard to traverse through your web application. Now, if your website is only usable through a mouse, they'll just immediately close your website and forget about it. We don't want that. So next up, understandable. It's important to ensure that your text is clear, concise, and it's simple, all right? We are looking to ensure that our website is accessible to as many people, and many people have different educational backgrounds. Now, as usual in everything in life, it depends on the target audience for your web application. But If we're looking at the general population, we need to make it simple, understandable, and clear on how to use your website. Next is robust. Now, this is an extremely important one for the disabled people, as they use a lot of different assistive technologies to access websites. Now, that does not mean they are always using a desktop computer to access your website. They could be using a tablet, a phone, any of these other devices. And if you don't implement ways in which your website can adapt to these other devices, they will not be able to interact with your website. And that is a shame. So we need to make sure that it's robust so that it can be accessed through any device. It can be used through a keyboard only. It can be accessed, it can be clear, it can be perceived. That is important. Now, I'd like to speak to you a bit of how HTML and Chrome render this accessibility that screen readers actually read. So besides the document object model that HTML creates for the structure of your website, it then uses CSS to make it graphically beautiful. It will also generate an accessibility tree. Now, this accessibility tree is what screen readers use to read out to the users that are using them. So this accessibility tree is generated similarly to the DOM, but it uses specific flags that you have set to read. So if there is a heading element, it will set it to JavaScript heading level 1 or JavaScript heading level 2. Now, it is important that we actually enforce these semantic elements because this is what the accessibility tree uses to generate. All right. So screen readers require that so that they can actually know what's going on. If you are simply just using divs and spans, the screen reader reads it as groups, and that's all it reads it as. So if you made your website with entirely just divs, all the user will hear is just text running through group, 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 group. Would they understand anything? No, not even slightly. So you can actually access this accessibility tree through Chrome DevTools, and it's in a very sneaky spot because it's not in the main directions. But if you open your DevTools and on the right-hand side, there is an accessibility side. I would suggest ticking the Enable Full Page Accessibility tree, as this shows the entire accessibility tree on the left side, similarly to where you would see the elements of your HTML. And as you can see, as it goes, link, skip to content, static text, skip to context, banner, link, focusable, main. These headings are really important because they are also landmarks that screen readers use. Now, a landmark is something that screen reader users can use to jump through your website. Similar to how you would look at a website, see 4 different headings. You would read those headings first before you read the content. A screen reader can do the same. It will jump through the headings, it will jump through the sections, and they can traverse your website efficiently and speedily like that. Now, there are simple basics to accessibility that you can use. The most important is semantic elements for your structure. So that is using headers, inputs, buttons for buttons. It's important to use these elements that have been given to us by HTML5 as they provide the appropriate accessibility tree elements to be rendered accordingly. This makes it easier for disabled people to use your website, and it is extremely valuable to them. Similarly, the structure of your HTML is important. You must think of your website as a normal reading document. The structure is how it's read by the screen reader. So if you have, for example, suddenly content, nav, heading, it doesn't make sense at all. It's going to read in that order from top to bottom, left to right. So you must make sure you have a good structure, header, nav, links, content. It needs to be in a appropriate flow that you want for your website. Next up is keyboard operable. I cannot emphasize this enough, as it is important for disabled users to only work with a keyboard. Using a mouse for visually impaired is next to impossible, as they obviously cannot see your mouse. And if they're using a screen reader for on hover with the mouse, it's going to sound like a bunch of gibberish. So using tab and enter to traverse your site, it is extremely valuable. Next thing is to design early. It's important to design accessibility into your website before you even implement anything. design the structure, design the color. You know, visually impaired people aren't just those who are blind or those who struggle to see. Color blindness, dyslexia. It is important to take this into account with text colors, how you show different, how you show different errors. Pop-up messages are extremely confusing to disabled users on screen readers, as out of nowhere, they'll just get a pop-up, error. Carry on with this thing? No, it doesn't make sense. It's confusing. And another thing that's important is to use redundancy from visual elements. So besides using just a visual element to show, you know, green text means good, you know, there needs to be a way for screen readers to actually know how to alert the user that, yes, they are doing something good, you know, they're doing something bad. Okay. Now, with regards to these accessibilities, I want to share with you a website that you and me as devs can use to enforce accessibility into our websites, and that is the W3C WAI, which is the World Wide Web Consortium Web Accessibility Initiative. Now, this website provides us clear and concise documentation on how we can develop our websites appropriately for it to be accessible. So, for example, using an associative label on every control. So what ends up happening if you have a label associated with an input, it will say label username, control input. You understand? So it's clear for them to understand that what they are focused on is an input for a username, and they can type in. Another thing that I want to show you, and I want to stress the importance of semantic elements, is, now I know you cannot hear, there's no audio here, but I will guide you through it. In this video, this is a screen reader user that is traversing a poorly made website. This website has an entrance page, for example, this one, celebrating 1 year start, but this is an overlay of their thank you page. So they have rendered their thank you page elements already on the screen. Now, visually, it looks like there's no issue, but as you move through this video, I don't know if you can see the highlighted green box over here, but that is currently the element that the screen reader is on. So as she traverses using, you know, tab or directional keys on the keyboard, it moves through. Now I want to ask you, what element is it hovering on? Nothing. But the screen reader at the moment is reading, thank you very much for using this website, heading level 1. Yeah, it makes sense. It really does. Now, for us visual people, we think, you know, this website looks perfectly fine, no issues at all. But for a screen reader, they're seeing, well, visualizing this start page and the thank you page in exactly the same place. And they don't know how to traverse it. They just assume, oh, great, I've already finished. And they'll just close the website and move on with their life, even though they haven't even started. All right. And now if you have absolutely no choice, you know, you're creating a custom element and you cannot figure out a way to use semantic elements to do it, your best bet is ARIA. Accessible Rich Internet Applications. Now, this is just a way to tell the accessibility tree on what to say to the screener. That's literally it. It's just a way to label your components with the appropriate ARIA roles. So for example, control or content information, which would be your footer or main, and it will do what semantic elements already do for you, but you have control on it and you can decide what to say. Yeah. And finally, I just want to say thank you very much for attending. I do appreciate it. And I do think as devs, you know, we must remember that we develop for people, not just companies. And accessibility is a big part. And also if you implement accessibility early, you'll realize that your solutions will be a lot cleaner, a lot more visually pleasing to look at, firstly. And they'll be easier for also those who aren't visually impaired. Accessibility is great for everyone, not just those who struggle. So please keep that in mind when you develop. Thank you.